We know we don't pretend in a series like this to be able to get you to the summit of Mount Everest by any means, but we would like to share with you some of the opportunities and the techniques that are available in our alpine regions. The fundamentals of mountaineering and alpine travel can be learned partly, certainly through lectures and discussions and getting together with mountaineers that know something about it. But in many cases, you have to actually get right out in the field. Well, during the series that we have, we're going to work with a typical group of mountaineers that are anxious to gain a little knowledge on how to travel in the mountains and do it safely. The group that joined us for this series was 4 people that you'll see all the way through the series, and so I think it would be a good idea to introduce these people to you now. Dan Northcutt is a teacher in the Seattle Public Schools, teaches algebra at Jane Addams Junior High School. Dan had done some climbing years ago, had been with the mountain troops during the war, and now, after having been away from it a few years, he came back and decided that if he was going to get into it, he had better learn a little bit more about it and take up a course again. His wife, also, Doris Northcutt, became interested in mountaineering, and so for the last few years, she's been doing some climbing. And Cindy Gutkowski has been climbing with us during the series also. She's a student at the University of Washington here and climbs on weekends where she can kind of enjoy it and get out and get a little relaxing on the weekends. And the youngest contingent of our party for the series here is Ted Miles, a student at Ingram High School. Ted has been climbing for several years. And it's interesting, Ted's folks have thought that since he has an interest in the mountains, that it would be best that he get together with a group and a club and learn about how to be safer in the mountains. So certainly that if you're wondering about whether your son or your daughter should be out doing these things, that if they're interested at all, it would be desirable to get them some training and provide the opportunity for safely participating in our mountain recreation sports. Well, during the succeeding weeks, we're going into many different techniques of mountain travel. Well, next week, for instance, we're going into mountain living. If you're going to enjoy the mountain areas of our state, of our country, you want to know how to do it the easiest and how to get back in these areas and live fairly comfortable but not carry big heavy packs back in these hills. There's nothing worse than probably carrying 50 or 75 pounds on your back for just a 1 or 2 day trip. But with some training and some know-how and knowing about equipment, knowing where to get it and what equipment to use, you can cut it down so you're only carrying a small light pack for the weekend trip or the 1 week trip. And it's much more enjoyable that way. And also, we're going to go into something on physical conditioning. You know, you don't go back and climb in these areas or hike in these high, rugged alpine regions. Sitting behind a desk isn't certainly the best conditioning. Pushing a pencil is not quite enough. But there are many little things you can do to stay in shape and to stay in a little bit of condition, because you feel better when you're that way anyway. Just try next time, instead of taking the elevator, to walk up the stairs. And perhaps instead of walking just down to the store, maybe you can walk to work if you don't live too far. Or maybe you can get out and play a little tennis once in a while. All these things will help you keep in shape during the summer and during the spring or during the off-season when you can't get out. Another thing we're going to take up in succeeding weeks is something on the climbing rope, which is sort of the lifeline of the mountaineer. And climbing ropes, there are certain ropes that are made for actual mountaineering. The nylon rope is being used most now in this country and all over the world for mountaineering, and generally 120 feet is the standard length for a climbing rope, 3/8 inch in diameter. And also we'll go on later with some rock climbing and some snow climbing. The main part of the course probably is really the actual snow climbing and the rock climbing part of it. And many of our other activities will be to kind of support our participation in those particular sports. Rock climbing is a skill requiring a lot of balance and technique, a lot of practice on easy cliffs, where you're just climbing a few feet off the ground like Ted here, so that a little slip occurs, you've got a rope above you, so you're not going to fall very far, and if you do, it's only a few feet down to the ground. Because it's places like this that it's best to learn about climbing. And the same is true with snow travel. If you're going to learn, go up on easy slopes where you can slip and roll clear to the bottom and you won't get too hurt. And the way to learn is to get out and practice some more. Particularly finding people or finding groups that can provide this instruction for you. Because it's awfully difficult to learn these things just from sitting, reading them in a textbook. You get out and participate a little bit, you'll have a much easier time of using these techniques when you really have to. Later in the series, we're going on into mountain hazards and something on the use of maps, what to do when lost in the hills. We'll also later on go into an actual climb and see the entire climb, the party making it, leaving Seattle, all the preliminary work that they go through to make sure everything is okay. Because, you know, it's important to plan before going out in the mountains, too. You just don't pack everything into a car and take off. It's best if you can put a little thought into it, where you're going to go, who's going to be with the party, and do you have an adequate leader? Have you checked into the ranger station and so on? And all these things are important. There are many other things that we're going to cover in the course also. And to finally complete the series, we'll probably have a climb. We will have a climb of Mount Snoqualmie up near Snoqualmie Pass. It's an easy little climb of only 6,500 feet or so, and only a half a day or 3/4 of a day up here to make the climb. But it's a good area to practice in. It's near Seattle. You can do it to make these climbs early in the year. And they're climbs that even a group with relatively little experience can go up and participate in. And, you know, there's nothing like getting up once in a while into these high alpine regions or up on some of these peaks and sitting with a group on the summit, looking at the scenery nearby you and sharing in the comradeship of each other. And very often, most of the peaks in the Northwest have a register on the top, so you can sign your name and leave it here for posterity and see who else has come up and climbed the peak also. And these registers are left on the summit. You can, almost any peak in the state you climb, you'll find down there a little register box on the top, and I know some of these I've seen have dated back as far back as 1920. And probably, maybe you've seen in some of these register boxes that go back even further than that. The thing that we're going to go on to next week is something on the climbing rope as well as physical conditioning, as we mentioned. The climbing rope, the standard, is 120 feet, 3/8 inch in diameter, such like you see here. It weighs around 4 pounds or so, and it will hold roughly around 4,500 pounds. It comes in several sizes depending on what you're going to be doing, or a 3/8 inch rope like this one would be very good for most types of snow climbing and climbing glacier peaks like Mount Rainier. The standard procedure is to rope up on this for, say, a snow climb like Mount Rainier. There would be 3 people on the rope, one at each end and one in the middle. Now, people on the end, it's important how they tie into the rope, because if a fall occurs or a slip, you want to know that that rope is going to be around you such that it doesn't come off. Perhaps you've seen in some of the old pictures where the ropes go over the shoulders and they're wrapped around them and so on. But in recent years, there has been certain techniques developed particularly since the Second World War, through practice and through testing. They have found that the most desirable way of tying into the climbing rope is by using a series of these ropes around your body, so that instead of having just one loop around the body, you have 2 or 3 or 4, so that when a slip or a fall occurs and it's stopped, the strain around your body is stretched out over several inches instead of on one thin strand of rope. And this is why you don't really use a thinner rope than this, even though it may be strong enough, is that you're also looking for a greater diameter here around the waist, so that in the event of a fall or a slip, that you won't get hurt. You know, we mentioned another thing in the series here, and that was snow climbing. That one of the main instruments in snow climbing is the ice axe itself. And you saw our little party there practicing the use of the ice axe. The ice axe is used primarily to stop oneself in a fall. For example, the tale of the three fishermen we were reading, he didn't have an ice axe, and I am sure that about halfway down that slope he would greatly have appreciated one of these in his hands, but not only that, the knowledge of how to use it too. Because if he had known how to stop himself, if he had an ice axe, he probably could have stopped himself in 4 or 5 feet by jamming the pick on in the slope slowly as he slid on down, rolling over onto his stomach. It's these little techniques like this that are so important to survival in the mountains and getting around and enjoying many of our alpine recreation regions. The climbing rope we've been discussing too, and the way to tie it around you, some of the things we'll go into next week. The rope should be passed around several times around your waist so that you get 2 or 3 loops or coils around your body, or even a few more. And the rope is also tied very tightly, preferably just under the belt, so that if a fall occurs, the initial shock of the fall or the slip, I hate to call the fall, it sounds kind of horrible, but most of the time it's really a little slip that you're taking. You tie it real tight on there, so you just cinch it right on in. And these strands are beneath the belt here, several inches. And then you take a little tuck up in here with the rope, and you tie a bowline knot right around all the coils, so that when a pull comes on the rope, it comes around all the coils instead of just one. See, now when you pull on that, it pulls equally on all the little strands. And then you take a little half hitch in it too and kind of secure it. But this is, the climbing rope like this is the lifeline of the mountaineer. And a climbing rope like this, when you know how to use it, can be, of course, a tremendous asset. And it's little techniques like this that, again, will prove the difference between enjoying a trip up in the mountains and not enjoying it. The rope isn't a tow rope. It is simply a means of stopping a fall and reducing the consequences of a fall. You don't throw it up and lasso little rock projections and hang there. You just simply tie it on you, and knowing how to use it wisely are able to stop falls by techniques that we're going to go into during the next